Hi there, Chris here with another fresh tip for you all. In this video we are going to continue our look at painting the elf from RelicBlade. This is part of the Wilderkin faction in that game. And in the previous video we worked on the skin, and the hair was done a while ago in a hair series. So the body has already been primed in Stylo-Res Gray. We're going to use ivory to base coat the areas of the cloth, the gloves, as well as the little bands on the arm and down by the knees. We'll paint the boots later on. I'm using Vallejo ivory for this to lay down this base coat. You may notice some speckling on the body, and that is just from a previous thing I was doing. It was basically, I was doing blood splatters. She was standing too close to a corpse grinder, so, you know, occupational hazards, I suppose. With this ivory, I will have to apply 2 coats. Deep green from Model Color from Vallejo, medium blue from Vallejo Model Color, and we are going to use some Vallejo Retarder Medium. This stuff is to slow down the drying process of the paints. As you may or may not know, with acrylic paints, water-based acrylic paints, they dry fairly quickly. So I'm going to use a little bit of retardant in these. I'm going to mix this thoroughly. It's kind of a 1-to-1 ratio. I'm going to come back to the ivory, slap a little bit onto the palette, and add a little bit of retardant to this as well. And we are going to do some wet blending. So I'm going to concentrate most of the darker turquoise color that I've created here. I'm sure Vallejo creates a turquoise, which is why I added the blue-green together, but I didn't have one on hand, so I said, well, I might as well just mix myself some because I wanted to go with this blue-green for the outfit. With this color, I basically begin laying it down. Now here I'm kind of demonstrating it fairly haphazardly. You obviously will take more time, and then with the ivory I simply start blending it into, starting off into a clean area of ivory where it was drier, and then begin moving the ivory in. Now you may find that when adding the retardant to the paint, it actually increases a bit of the body of the paint. Anybody familiar with Citadel paints, it starts to feel a bit more like a Citadel paint in that regards to how kind of thick and greasy it kind of feels. That's normal with this medium added to the paint, and typically Vallejo is a fairly thin-bodied paint, which means that it's just, you know, it's a thin paint, but that's actually a very good quality in our miniature painting. So you can see here I'm just simply working the paint back and forth. Now because we've added that retardant medium to the mixtures, both the white and this turquoise color we've made, we can work with this for, I don't know, it takes about an hour or so for it to dry, especially if you use quite a bit of retardant medium. It can actually slow down the process. Now going with a 1-to-1, I find typically I get about an hour's life out of the paint. Here I'm quickly switching to another brush. It's dry and clean, and this is just to basically feather out the blend across the colors. You can see here I'm trying to be mostly careful as I work my way around, and if I feel like I need a little bit more color, then I simply add a bit more. The whole reason for using a clean, dry brush for that is so that we're not simply just adding more paint to the mixture. Now, of course, we can, because there is retardant down, we can actually really kind of overwork the paint and actually pull it down to the base coat, as it were. And sometimes that's not what you want to do. Sometimes it is what you want to do, because again, when we are doing this kind of layering or blending, I should say, we can end up laying quite a bit of paint down on the model surface, and that can obscure details and, you know, ruin our final effect. Here I'm just simply jumping forward a bit. I've already done the legs. Again, it's the same process. Here on the gloves on the hands, I lay a little bit more color, and then I just quickly grab some ivory, and in fact it had a little bit of the turquoise color in it. I really wasn't that concerned about it, and I simply just blend it back. And because we have so much time to play with the color, we can play with, blending it back and forth. Again, I'm coming back to a clean, dry brush, and I'm simply just going to pull out the excess. And in fact, really what I'm doing here is actually a bit closer to more of a feathering. If you're familiar with feathering, where basically you put a wet layer down and then blend the bottom end of it out, and it gives you your transition, and it allows the base tone underneath to visually create the blend, as it were. And that's really kind of closer to what I was doing there. Really, it's kind of all sorts of blends and techniques, and the whole point of this video is not about wet blending or anything like that. This is really just what I did for the cloth. We're jumping back into our medium blue and our deep green and some ivory. We're going to mix these in a 1-to-1 on the palette. Now this is after the model has sat for a couple of hours, and in fact I'm pretty sure the paint on the palette is probably mostly dry. Oh yeah, this was like a day later. Here I'm just simply mixing the color, trying to match close to what I had previously, the previous day really, and you really don't need to add or leave the paint for a day or anything like that for it to dry. It actually dries in a couple hours. It's just the way I was, scheduled to work on this stuff and my time. But anyway, here you can see I'm using this highlight color, and I'm just simply layering it in. I've thinned it out just with the dampness of the brush, and I'm just creating some fine highlights along the surface. Now again, with the blending, really is a bit more of a sketch, providing the undertones and where I want to go. And we could also continue to blend more color on top of this, building it up brighter if we wanted to, but I'm just demonstrating that, we can use a wet blend in this fashion to simply sketch out how we want the color to be perceived on that surface, and then we can come in and fine tune it with more precise layering and glazing and things of that nature if we want. And with miniature surfaces, this is the way I often go about doing the wet blend. A wet blend is often not my final result on a surface. It is actually just more or less the beginning of a transitional on a surface. So with this, I'm simply just coming in. I've thinned the color way down, so these are actually little glazes that I'm doing. When I apply it onto this model surface, it looks quite intense, but you give it a moment to dry and it's not quite as intense. But I do it a few times, and then I simply add a little bit more ivory each time, layering in more highlights as I go. And I end up building the intensity up on the cloth a little too bright. Now, for those of you who want to do this on your models, you could stop at any point that you're happy with your results. I mean, you don't have to do it exactly as I'm showing you here. I'm just kind of, hopefully opening the door for you, so to kind of, get you used to these concepts as far as, creating blends and, using one technique on a model surface, is kind of a hindrance, really. You use multiple techniques to achieve your desired result, and that's oftentimes what I'm trying to illustrate often with these videos. So once I've glazed up those surfaces with that, I simply add a bit more white to that mixture, and I'm also going to take a bit of glaze medium to this as well, and I'm going to thin it down with a little bit more water, because I'm really kind of doing some fine-tune highlights here, and I want these to be really, really subtle, and I want to build up to the effect. And so this is closer to like a fine glaze along these edges here. It looks really intense when I initially lay it down, but I actually have to lay it down 2 or 3 times, which is fine. Again, this is kind of done off camera, because otherwise this video would be like 5 hours long kind of thing, which would be really, really, really boring. But again, you can see with these final highlights, it's really, really minimal. And of course, if you're going to do this kind of work process as well, I highly recommend you work from a wet palette rather than a dry palette, just because you can preserve those color mixtures longer. Pterodon Turquoise is next with some Citadel contrast medium. The contrast paint is from Citadel, and of course I'm taking a very heavy helping of contrast medium, thinning the color way down, and I'm going to apply this over the entirety of each of those little surfaces, the armband, the gloves, the top, as well as the tunic and the pants as well. Again, we're going to build it up. Here you can see I'm just drawing some excess color out from some areas as it's a little too intense, and applying this contrast on top of everything builds down towards a deeper tone, as well as helping to smooth out some of those transitions, especially if your brushwork was a little bit hasty, like mine was here in some areas. It just was, I was just kind of quickly laying it in, and I wasn't that too concerned. but it knocks the color way down. Now, if you really, really enjoyed it how it looked before, well, we can always build back up to that. Here I'm taking 2 drops of medium, a dollop of that previous mixture, and of course this is after the contrast has completely dried, and I've thinned the color down with just a little bit of dampness of brush, and I am going to glaze in these transitions, especially on the cloth, because I do want this cloth to be separate feeling from the pants. And well, it's the cloth hanging from, you know, through the midriff, or like a loincloth kind of thing. It feels more like it should be like it's part of her top versus, you know, what her pants are. But I'm imagining maybe it's like a jumpsuit. I have no idea. I'm making it up as I go, which is oftentimes, you know, you do. So after I'm happy with the few glazed layers that I laid there, you can see how it brought the color back up, but we have more of that contrast left. We're going to come in with the ivory, just the dampness of the brush to thin it down just a bit, and we are going to do some fine-tuned highlights here. We're just going to get some of the edges, some of the high corners, and things of that nature. It's really, really a fine highlight we're laying down, and I want to concentrate more of that white on that cloth there that hangs kind of like in the middle there. I want to make that brighter. But that is the elf cloth. That's various techniques to get to our end result. I was kind of, you know, making it up as I went. I wasn't sure which way I wanted to go, but, you know, that's how she goes. Big thank you to all my patrons without their support. These videos would not be possible. If you're considering Patreon support, a huge, huge thank you to everybody who does. And, of course, click the link in the description below, and there are varying tiers of support. Take care of those brushes, and they will take care of you.